Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is the firing process, because we go from building, right? So you have your moldable, leather hard, bone dry clay. We're going to go into the building of it. Once you are finished, though, you have a bone dry piece, right? So this is bone dry right now. Listen, ready? Okay. Now, if I were to take this bone dry piece and put it into water, what would happen? Well, you'd have basically, if I were to dip a bone dry piece of clay into water, you'd probably end up with a sludgy mess, okay? Because what happens is, unless you have this new element that we're going to talk about, you're just going to have this continuous recycling of clay, okay? Because no matter what, water is going to affect the clay unless you bring in this element of fire, okay? I'm going to sneeze in a minute. So fire. This is after I have processed this in a kiln. A kiln is basically a giant oven that I fire your pieces to. Your pieces in the first firing will go to about 1986 or something like that, 1986 degrees Fahrenheit. So this is a piece, unlike this, that is fired. So listen. Do you hear the difference? Now, if I take, and even pour a little water into this cup, nothing is going to happen to it. So there's water in this right now, and I'm just going to hold this. If you notice, it's not disintegrating at all. So like, even if I were to rub the wet part on my hands, like, nothing happens, okay? And the reason for that is because in this first firing, which is called a bisque fire, in that first firing, what happens is you get basically a transformation. It's a chemical change in the clay. So the stuff that was not processed in a bone dry piece, once it gets fired, there's actually what we call a quartz conversion. So it ends up being a cross between something that's clay and something that's almost in a glass-like state, okay? But then the problem with this is, if I were to sit this on the table for an hour or two, the water would seep out because it's so very porous. What cavemen did with this, they'd fire them in their fires, like just hanging out around the fire. And then what they'd do is they'd line their pots with animal fat to make it so that the pores would clog up and they could hold their water in it. Well, we found a better way because, we're smart like that. So what we did was we discovered this thing called glaze. Glaze is a combination of clay, glass, and metal. And what happens is you dip it into a glaze and it will cover your entire pot in a layer of glass, okay, colored glass. So this is what happens when you have a bisque pot. This right here is after I dip it into the glaze.
Any sophomores who need to pick up their Chromebooks, please report to the auxiliary gym on the pool side. Again,
okay, I'm not, once again, if the announcements come on, I'm not going to edit them out. I've got 4 different preps, people. I'm crazed right now. I have to get stuff done. I didn't curse. Do you see that? I edited myself. Okay, anyway, moving on. So this is a glaze where we've dipped it in. Okay, it looks great, right? No, it's not. I wouldn't want to drink out of this. It's gross. Okay, it's powdery. See? No way. But if I fire it a second time, after I fire it a second time, I can end up with something that looks much more finished, polished, pretty. So this, believe it or not, is actually the same color, okay, And what has happened is this has gone through a second firing. So I fire it in the kiln a second time. This is a hotter firing now. It's 2136, or even maybe a little bit hotter depending on the type of glaze and the type of clay that I have, but you see where I'm going with this. So you go through not one but 2 firings in order to have an end product that you can use. I've eaten cereal out of this bowl. I can do anything I want. I can put it in the dishwasher. I can put it in the microwave. What I can't do is put it directly on the flames because that would shock it. But there's a lot of cool things that you can do with this whole process. You can make sculptures. You can make actual functional pieces. The pottery that you have in your house has at one point in time been clay, and it's gone through a series of changes, this whole process going from moldable, leather hard, bone dry, bisque fire, glaze fire. It's gone through the whole thing. So now you know the whole process. Does it take a long time? Heck yes, absolutely. But that's the great thing about it, is that your patience will kind of get tested. All right, take care. See ya.